Love is Blind, the reunion, and they did not disappoint. The tea was spilt. Also, did anyone else not realize that the reunion episode takes place about a year after, they've all seen each other? Like, I knew it took place quite a bit after, but I didn't know it was that long because some people came into this room with a different energy, Chelsea being one of them. But let's start off and break down this episode and how much stuff actually came to the surface. First off, the infamous trio, the Laura, Sarah J, and the Jeremy triangle. So Laura couldn't be there, but I'll be honest, I don't think she had that much care to be there. She said she was working, which she probably was. But this whole situation in terms of what happened with how Sarah J is not a girl's girl. She is very much not a girl's girl, and that was clear because girls were even AD went to her, remember, being like, hey, you knew she had a man, but you still sent him that message. Now, here's the thing. I kind of understand where she's coming from. Bear with me, ladies. Hold on. I know she's not a girl's girl, but bear with me. I get where she's coming from because she felt like she didn't get a lot of things off her chest in the pods. And so she was like, listen, I'm just going to take a stab at the dark, right? And she sent him that message. Was that disrespectful to him being engaged? 100%. 100%. But you know what they say? All's fair in love and war. And so if you're going to do that, girl, you play the risk of others not liking you. And the thing is, it's interesting because Jeremy's actually more in the wrong than Sarah J. Jeremy was the one who is engaged and who is in another relationship, who said he loved another woman. But then for him to actually entertain SJ and then to meet her and then be with her for till 5 a.m. in the morning, that was very intentional. And he's technically in the wrong, but she was getting the most heat by the other women. And I just chased thinking, how does that make sense? How can the girl who's single, granted she didn't respect the relationship, but how does the girl who's single get more heat than the guy who was not only in a relationship, but was engaged to someone else? And I think this really shows how much women want to make an example of other women who aren't a girl's girl. Women really want to make an example of other women who are willing to sacrifice the connection to the social community of women for a man. The women are like, you know what, we're going to make an example of you. And I think the women wanted to do that with her. Now, were they justified in being pissed off with her? Yeah, and even Jess got involved, which I was a bit disappointed because for me, I thought Jess was pretty good as a general whole, but she kind of just started yelling and getting herself involved in the argument between Sarah J and Laura. I was a bit like, that's distasteful. You didn't need to do that. It's just really interesting. It's interesting for us to note how much of an example they want to make of Sarah Jane, even though she was technically the one who was single. Now, we all want to know, why did Jeremy do it? Why did Jeremy switch sides, right? And if I'm being honest with you, I think we just have to be real. He started to switch sides and started to question about SJ because Laura is mad disrespectful to men in general. The way she conducted herself in the relationship, he would be playful, he'd be teasing, etc. And she would be so disrespectful to him. She did not see him as a man in the relationship. She saw him as the person who fulfills the role of boyfriend/husband to be, right? I don't think she was in love with him. I think she just liked that she had someone she could say, I'm a woman who is engaged. I think she used him more for the status of being a woman who is taken. I did not see from her a level of, I'm not going to say she didn't grow love for him, but the way she conducted herself in the relationship, at least for him and what matched him, he very much felt disrespected. And we know that respect is love to a man. It doesn't matter how much she says, I love you, but we know that respect is love to a man. Now, does that condone how he handled the situation? Absolutely not. It doesn't condone it. We can see why. Moving swiftly on, they brought on, not a surprise guest, but a familiar face, the big friendly giant Trevor. And here's the thing, everybody loved this man. Everyone was like, this is the BFG. He's the biggest guy in the room, but he is the most kind, most gentle. And then we come to learn, I didn't know this because I'm not on social media crazy, right? Unless I'm doing it for work. But that screenshot of him and his girlfriend, who he had before he went in the pods, came out. Because when he came out, I was like, oh, Trevor. But then no one was clapping for the guy. No one was clapping for the guy. And the moment he sat down, the host was like, So tell us about, the screenshots about you and your girlfriend knowing that you're going on. Yo, these hosts love stirring up heat. They love it. They didn't even ask this guy, hey Trevor, how are you? What's going on, bro? They're literally like, he sat down. They're like, tell us how you conned the production team. That's actually a big point. They actually would be super angry about that. But they handled themselves really well. The hosts handled themselves really well. But this guy did not have a word to say. He was like,
yeah, well, I'm just, I went in for good and bad intentions.
Bro, just be honest. Like, the cat is out of the bag at this point. Just be honest. Say, look, me and my woman, we thought it'd be cool for one of us to maybe go on. I bet you his girlfriend replied to be on. And if one of them went on, it was like, yeah, let's use this to raise our clout, raise our status, which will probably allow them to earn some money, at least some quick money, being a reality TV star until the next, season comes out. And then they run off into the sunset. But it's so mad because I'll be honest, I thought he was a really great match for Chelsea when they were connecting. I thought they would have been a much better match overall. But it's actually a really good thing that Chelsea did not choose him. Like, at least with Jimmy, she had somewhat of a chance. But with this guy, I'm not even convinced that she had a chance. I'm not convinced. And then they're like, okay, well, after we just watched Trevor stutter and not say anything, for the guy who's actually really quite talkative, it was quite funny. They just were just like, okay, well, thanks, Trevor, you can leave. And he just left the stage. And bro, it was quiet. It was quiet. Not a clap, not a yay. I mean, there wasn't a boo. But when he left, it was dead quiet. The silence was deafening, for sure. Moving on to the next part of the episode, everyone's favorite couple, Clay and AD. It was actually quite an emotional and heartbreaking story what they had, because you can tell Clay, he seriously loves this woman. Like, he seriously loves this woman. And he was like, he saw about how things were handled. And I do think if he knew he didn't want to get married, he shouldn't have gone to the altar. However, I do suspect that there was a level of pushing him to the altar by the producers. It wouldn't surprise me if they were like, look, we would have one couple who aren't going, Chelsea and Jimmy, right? We would have one couple that aren't going to the altar. But to build the drama, to build the tension, like, if we're going to say no, wait until we're filming at the wedding because it's more dramatic and it's more of a fallout. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying that's what they did, but if they pushed him in that area, I wouldn't be surprised. But then at the same time, I would say if he's, a man with integrity and he knows that's not what he wants, he probably should have not gone to the altar. But he seriously loved this woman. And he even says about how he was starting therapy, how he said no because he wasn't ready. And I think him saying no was the right decision. Him saying no was actually the right decision. It was how he handled saying no at which point, which obviously made her feel embarrassed and made her feel that she's not good enough, which is justifiably so. But he really made an effort, at least that time period before the reunion, to say how much he's worked on himself. And I'm pretty biased here, but it's actually really nice to see a black man on mainstream TV actually say about him going to therapy, actually say, look, these are some of the traumas that I've had, and I'm doing things to work on myself to become a better man. And, he's like, I'm not perfect, but his energy and his intentions are in the right place. And even though he said no, I think he left a lot of us actually rooting for him and rooting for them getting back together. Do you think they're going to get back together? Because when she was asked, hey, would you go out? She did say no. She did not say no. I really hope they get back together. Let me know if you think they're going to get back together in the comments below. Moving on to the next part of the episode, looking at Amy and Johnny, the perfect couple of that season. I can't even lie, they're a super cute couple, right? They don't take each other seriously. They have a lot of fun. I think Amy and Johnny are the perfect example of marry your best friend. It seems like they've been best friends for a long time, right? And the chemistry is also there as well. And I do agree. Someone brought up the question about her contraception, and they're like, oh, she didn't want to go on any contraception. He was like, oh, well, I don't want to get anyone pregnant. I don't want to get you pregnant. And I was like, what about condoms? Like, just use condoms. And I think sometimes we're like, oh, well, I don't want to use condoms because it doesn't feel as good. Okay, well, if you're not going to use any birth control and you don't have a baby, then don't have sex. Sorry. Like, you can't ask for everything. You can't say, I don't want to go on birth control or use any protection, but then I also don't want to get you pregnant and you know that's a higher risk. Just don't do it. But they are definitely the perfect couple of this season. And they asked them about, oh, do you have any arguments? Like, how do you handle that? And they're like, no, we don't have any arguments. And I'm like, not that they don't have arguments, I actually think they know how to handle disagreements very, very well. So maybe they don't have arguments, but they definitely have disagreements. And that's just credit to their maturity. I think they're very much a lot of couple goals. People look at them and be like, I want to have a fun relationship like that. And all the fair play to them. Then we move on to Jimmy and Chelsea. Yo, I've already said this, but the hosts are the king and queen of bringing up heat. The way they literally went, so Jimmy, how did you feel about Chelsea exposing to the entire international world that you slept with your best friend? Dead. I can't. I mean, they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. I think one thing that was really nice is that Chelsea did take accountability for, the wrong that she did, which was really good. And saying that, she was obviously quite insecure. She has a lot of insecurities in which she was looking to Jimmy a lot to take responsibility for those insecurities. But I think it's really important for us to reflect that this is a really huge thing for guys. For him to share that with her in a vulnerable moment, right? And then for her to use that against him in an argument, a lot of men experience this. And because of this is what makes a lot of men very reluctant to open up and share with women, because every guy or a lot of men have experienced it being used against them by the woman at a point where she is emotional and she's trying to get a dig at him. And while it may not have been intentionally malicious on Chelsea's part towards him, what she did do is she prioritized how she felt in the moment over doing what is right and betrayed his trust with that. And when they asked him, hey, is that something that kind of shifted things for you a bit in terms of how you see her for being wife material and being someone that you want to share your life with? And he was like, yeah, I believe him, because that's a really big sense of trust that has been betrayed. And it's not that she just said that publicly, she said that internationally. And one thing about Jimmy that I think is really good, he was like, look, I can handle it, but it's my best friend. And she had no part in this. She's not on the show. She didn't decide for her business to be aired out, right? And then now it is. And even though someone else did him wrong, he's still actually considerate of the other women in his life, which is rightfully so. Jimmy is one of those guys who's actually, out of all the guys on the show, I think Jimmy was probably more in touch with his emotions and was more aware and had the highest level of emotional intelligence. Yes, that probably meant he was a bit more sensitive and he wasn't as direct in some other ways, but he definitely had more of that emotional capacity compared to the other men on the show. And so it's just a real shame that the one guy who has that level of emotional capacity, it was used against him. But he seemed he was in a good place. Obviously, they asked him, so what happened when he saw Jess for the first time? And he is like, she's gorgeous and real have eyes, she's stunning. And when he said it, she was like, oh yeah, thank you so much, like she didn't know. And the worst thing about this is they're like, how did you see Jess? How did you see Jess? Because you didn't follow her. How did you find her? And he was like, oh yeah, I was training with Jeremy and he showed me. Jeremy is an A1 snake. I can't even lie to you. He is an A1 snake. Him and SJ, they deserve each other. Because not only did he do wrong in his own situation, but also him be like, hey bro, look at Jess while you're engaged to someone else. Like, bro, you're not helping yourself. Which we can't like you at this point. Like we just vehemently cannot like you at this point when you're moving in those slithering ways. And staying on Jess and Jimmy, Jess then called Jimmy out on an interview that he did, because she was like, we're on good terms. She was like, every interview I did, I spoke with you positively, even though things didn't end great between us. But then he did an interview, apparently saying some negative things about her. And she was like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? And you know what? Jess really is one of the epitomes of the girls on that show of a woman of high value. She's obviously attractive, but she's very, very classy. Even when she was getting upset, she didn't lash out at him. She wasn't insulting him. She's just like, you did this and I don't understand why. And it hurt me because I shared something with you. Explain yourself. And she gave him the space to do that. And the way she handled that was very exemplary, that I think we can all take from. especially as a woman of high value, which she definitely is. And then it's funny because he was like, yeah, well, you know, it felt like 10 minutes and then you just stormed out. And she was like, show me the receipts. Claps for Jess. Show me the receipts. Then they went to the clip and it'd been like, what, an hour and 27 minutes, hour and 28 minutes, something like that. And he was like, yeah, I agree. We should take a break. So it's like, bro, like you're letting yourself down at this point. Do you know what I mean? I would be curious to see what this interview is, but it's interesting because I think the way Jess has handled herself mostly has been a woman of dignity and class. And also she was in the same situation as SJ. She was in the same situation as SJ where the man she wanted had picked someone else. And not to mention that at the whole barbecue beach party thing, right, when they all met for a barbecue, Jimmy said to her that you were my number one pick and still are. And she still didn't go after him like that. But then at the same time, I do think, if we're being honest, I think in her head, she's like, well, in her head, she definitely felt that maybe she's more desirable than Chelsea, like objectively so, right? And so she's like, I don't need to do anything because he's just going to come to me at some point anyway, right? I mean, she did say herself that when he sees her, he's going to choke. And when he saw her, he choked. And speaking of class, we also have to give credit to our girl AD. Beautiful, very sexy woman, and she is definitely a woman of class. If you notice, she's an excellent listener, an excellent observer. When arguments going around, she's like this. Okay. And then even when she communicates, she's like, okay, yes, but you did do X, Y, and Z, which is why X, Y, and Z happened, right? And I'm biased, but we love to see a beautiful black woman with class. We love it. And then they had to address the thing about Chelsea, the biggest storm about Chelsea, of her saying that she looked like Megan Fox. No, wait, let me correct myself. Of other people saying that she looked like Megan Fox. And it's funny because she said it as if it was a throwaway comment. No. In the pods, when she said that, she knew what she was doing.
And it's just because I have dark hair and blue eyes.
Ooh, say it.
It's, I don't even know if it's MGK's wife or his girlfriend.
Megan Fox?
She knew what she was doing. She knew, right? Because the whole thing is love is blind, right? You don't know what the other person looks like. But for her to say, oh, well, I've been told that I look like Megan Fox, you are clearly painting a picture in the man's eyes of, oh, you look like Megan Fox. I even think more so why that was fully intentional was because she knew Jimmy was talking to Jess. She knew Jimmy was talking to Jess. And so I think she said that as a way to compete with Jess. Now, the irony is it worked, but it backfired because it made Jimmy go, oh, wow, this girl looks like Megan Fox. I have a great connection with her. And for Jimmy, we know the whole thing of Jess having a child was a little bit of a turn off for him. So it was like, wow, I've got someone who I know is really attractive and I have this connection. Yeah, let's go with that. And then he saw her, and then on the reveal, the way he was looking around, looking at the producers like, guys, I've been lied to. Like, you see this, right? I shouldn't laugh, but it was quite funny. It was quite funny. And then we move on to the most Christian couple of the group, Kenny and Tiffany. I think from day one, there wasn't really any chemistry there. Like the level is great because they had such a level of love and respect for each other. But I didn't sense any level of romanticism. Like every time they kissed, it kind of looked like a brother and sister kissing. It didn't, obviously not visually because they literally look nothing alike. But I mean, the way they kissed, I didn't see passion. I didn't see sparks. You know what I mean? It's not all about the sparks. I'm the first to say, hey, if you don't feel the sparks on the first date, that doesn't mean it was a bad date. It felt very platonic. And so for them to not work, I'll be honest, didn't really surprise me. I think they're a really great example of, while it's important to have love and respect for whoever you're going to choose, there does have to be a little bit of distance and a little bit of flexibility in regards to the respect, where you can have a level of consensual sexual objectification with that person. Now, with those two, I do wonder, there was a lot that we didn't see because he did make a comment about, when he tries to be affectionate, she rejects him, but then she only wants to be affectionate on her terms. And the only reason I recognize that is because I've had that experience with a woman before where she was very much like didn't want to be affectionate and stuff. But then there'll be other times where she was almost so overly affectionate, it was almost clingy. So I got confused because I was like, sometimes I'm quite a tactile person. So sometimes I try and hold her hand or do this and she'll be like, nah, will you do it? But there are other times she would be all over me and I'm like, I'm confused. Should I reciprocate this or are you just going to reject me again? So I would be really curious about that. But they said that they're really good friends, which is really great. And one thing I'm glad that they acknowledged is that they said if they met other people, that they would respect boundaries of their relationship outside of those two, that if they had to reestablish certain boundaries for their own now friendship, that they would do that. And I think that's a great sign of maturity. Now we have to move on to Mr. Missing Superman and Mr. Clark Kent of the group, Matthew. My boy, Matthew. Now, I thought he was my guy because it was really nice to see how this guy who's obviously quite introverted, kind of coming out of his shell. But then they're like, show us the receipts. Did he say the same thing to two different women? And he kind of did, but he kind of didn't. I do disagree with AD on here because she was like, well, you basically said the same thing. And I'm like, it wasn't the same thing, but it was along the same lines. It was along the same lines of him being like, oh, well, I want to ask for your father for your hand in marriage. And maybe that's just what he does. And maybe that wasn't specific to AD and she thought that it was. But to be honest, I do think it was the whole thing of, oh, well, since yesterday, now my mind's gotten really confused or now my mind's gotten really clear and et cetera, et cetera. Feel so bad because I don't know who the other girl's name was, but you know, he did say a similar thing to there, but it's a shame he couldn't have been there because if he was there, if he had been brought on the way Trevor had and been done dirty like that, I actually don't know what he would have done. I actually think he would have stormed off. I think it would have been like, I'm not here for this and just walked out. Damn, that would have been serious. And then AD was asked by the host, did you meet up with Matthew? And the host must know. They must know, like, have back channels where they hear all this stuff because I wouldn't have even thought of that. But the host asked her, hey, did you meet up with Matthew? And she said, yes. And they were like, how many times? She was like, oh, we went for a date. She was like 2.5 days. We went for a date, then we went for another one, and he kind of made me dinner. You know what that half is? I don't think they had sex. I think they did stuff. Because she was like 2.5 days. Because if you went on a first date and then just went for dinner, you would say, oh yeah, we went on 2 days. But if she said 2.5 dates, maybe she slept with him. I think she slept with him. She slept with him. 2.5, why would you say 2.5 dates? I don't think she was going to disclose that. But I think she looked at him and he's a good looking guy. Like Mr. Clark Kent, Matthew Clark Kent, he's a good looking guy. And then they asked Claire, they're like, how do you feel about that, Claire? And he was like,
no, man, it is what it is, man. It is what it is. It's, fair enough.
Don't hate me, Southerners. I had to give it a go. But yeah, we got some juicy stuff in that reunion and it was really cool how they brought back, you know, other couples from previous seasons. I think I only watched Love is Blind from the past couple of seasons. So there's some couples I just didn't recognize. All of them being pregnant. You know, Kwame's out here. I think he had a hair transplant or he definitely got something going on there because before he had, you know, the hairline was not rocket, but now it's rocket. So good for you, bro. But yeah, let me know what you think. Did you enjoy the season? What do you think about the reunion? Who was your favorite person and why? But thanks for tuning in and I will see you in the next episode. And as always,